introduce myself. I'm Leonie. Everybody calls me Leo. I'm the founder and current president of RIISE, but really just what I did was to come up with the idea of the student organization and connect these awesome people that are in the call right now, who I want to give a shout out to, which is Sean, who's there, Kelsey and Ryan, who is also there. We have Shelby as well, who was there since the beginning. Who else is there? I think Noah Smith is coming for us. Oh yeah, Noah Smith is there as well. And so, and yeah, so shout out to all of the RIISE members that are on the call. Our mission is really to just raise awareness for adaptive sports and empower interdisciplinary students. So not just engineers, but also marketing students, business students, people interested into entrepreneurship. And so really interdisciplinary students to pursue projects at the interface of inclusivity, sports, and engineering. And our vision is really that we just imagine a world where all athletes who just have a desire to play sports can play it and perform at their full potential. And so how we're planning to do that is to really have an impact on social media and on media platforms, to share our stories using the podcast that Sean has been leading so well for a couple of months now. And we are also planning on hosting athletics events and pursue engineering projects on campus with some of the projects that we've been doing so far. And so I'll let Joanna talk about this more later. We had actually our first event hosted by our operations committee. I think Kelly is on the call right now. She's the director of our operations committee. We had our first in-person event last Monday. Went super well. We had people come and try the chairs and just experience what it is like to be on the chair and navigate on campus. And then this is our second really broad event tonight. And then we're also participating in Purdue Day of Giving on April 28th. And so we're kind of moving it on with some projects, super impressed by how the members have been able to accomplish these projects. And some of our long-term as well projects are to improve accessibility on Purdue's campus. And so the development committee has been talking about going around and doing an audit of campus and seeing how can we impact and how can we improve some of the buildings on campus and some of the ways that we can navigate. And then we're working as well with the COREC to start intramurals, either wheelchair basketball team or sitting volleyball or different sports that we want to add to our platform at the COREC. And then maybe eventually we're hoping to start an actual team at Purdue. And then we want to host the Will Rise event annually as well, which is a broader event every year that will attract attention. And then I'll let Joanna take it away with some of the engineering projects that RIISE have been doing.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly talk about the current projects we have. So we're lucky enough to have both Sean and Shelby debug constantly, nonstop, to get project ideas from. So we have a project currently for each of them. So since Shelby is about to graduate and she's doing from her graduate school in agronomy, we wanted to try to make her chair a little bit more all-terrain. So we're in the beginning process of prototyping. As you can see, there's a lovely picture of her on the field and Charlie messing with her chair. And our rough drawings, don't judge them, they're rough. But his drawing of what we're going to try to do for her. And then for Sean, he was annoyed at the everyday process of getting his shoes on. So he jokingly mentioned he wanted a shrinking foot. And so we said, why the heck not? And so our teammate Jacob, who is not here tonight, went ahead and made a lovely CAD model on there which is going to attempt to have a kind of a crossbow action to shrink the foot in. And we're hoping to eventually get that 3D printed sometime soon. We're collaborating with the 3D Printed Prosthetics Club on campus to hopefully get that done. And yeah, that's just a brief summary of where we're at with these projects. And we hope to continue getting more ideas. And that's why we have these lovely panelists to hopefully spark some ideas of your own.
Awesome. Sean, then do you want to take it away with a little bios of our panelists for tonight?
Yes, I can do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the bios, and I will be kind of your MC for tonight. So if anyone has any questions that you want to ask our panelists, feel free to put them in the group chat or feel free to message me. So first we have Nick. Nick is a member of the Canadian wheelchair basketball team. He helped Canada reach the games for Tokyo and was on the team for Rio. And he played on scholarship at the University of Illinois, and he lost his leg to cancer at age 15. And like Leo said earlier, I'm also the host of the podcast. So I had the opportunity to speak with maybe one of your teammates at the time, Nick, Brian Bell. I spoke with him and he was on the podcast for our episode 4. So that's a pretty cool overlap right there. So if anyone has any questions throughout the time for Nick or for any of the other panelists, remember, just feel free to message me and we can go on to Dr. Meg Fisher. She's a cyclist. She's a 10-time world champion. She's a retired member of Team USA. She participated in Rio and London. She's a winner of a gold, silver, and bronze medal, and she is a doctor of physical therapy, athletic performance coach, and motivational speaker. So she quite literally does it all. Again, if anyone has any questions for her, we'll give her time to shine a little bit later, and throughout the time, just send me some questions. And now we can move on to D'Artagnan. It's nice to officially meet you. We've been playing phone tag for quite some time. I've been trying to get him on the podcast, but every single time it comes up, I have to cancel in some way, which is highly unprofessional of me. But D'Artagnan is a judo athlete. He's a 2-time Paralympic medalist, bronze in London and bronze in Rio. In 2014, he was the IBSA world champion. He's a 5-time senior national Paralympic champion, and he's from Cleveland, Ohio. And that's kind of my brief introduction. This is more of their time to shine and not mine. I just wanted to introduce them so everyone has a little taste of who the people are that will be speaking. So if that's okay with everyone else, I think we are good to go to the next step.
Awesome, Nick. Take it away.
Just give me 1 second. I'm going to plug my computer in. It looks like it's about to die. So my name is Nick Gonchin. I'm apparently one of maybe 2 Canadians on the call here, or 3. 4? Oh, yeah? Oh,
Is Meg? Oh. Meg, are you Canadian too?
Yeah, it wasn't in your bio. I didn't know.
No, I am. I was born in Alberta. My first language is Canadian. So if anyone needs someone to translate, I'm happy to. So yes.
I'll try to keep the slang out of it. Anyways, so I went to University of Illinois for my bachelor's. Actually, Michael Frogley, that's on the call here, he was my coach when I started going there, and that was in 2012. Shortly after that, I made the national men's team. So that would have been right after London. So 2013, I would have made the men's team. So after I finished school in 2015, I went up and trained for the Rio Paralympics. And then following that, I lived in Germany for a year, played pro there in Hamburg, a city in northern Germany. It was a very cool experience. And then came back. I met my wife kind of along the process. I actually proposed to her when I was living in Germany. So came back to Canada and the GTA, the Greater Toronto area, and started to do my master's. And I did a master's in exercise physiology. So I did that at Ontario Tech, which doesn't matter. Let's just say Toronto for sake of argument. And then following that, I started in prosthetics orthotics. So I'm in the technical fabrication school, just about to finish. So this is kind of like where I guess my love of like ergonomics, biomechanics, and physiology kind of came to a clash, which is one of the reasons that I really like the field. So I'm not going to really talk too much more about myself. I wanted to bring some ideas. So I was thinking, what would be beneficial for wheelchair basketball, I guess? Like, what could we invent that would make people's lives easier? As you probably all know, wheelchairs are extremely expensive, and there are few people that have, funding for these things. But for instance, my chair that I have right now it's a used car. It's $12,000-$13,000, and you have to sort of go through many iterations of a wheelchair before you kind of get it to exactly how you want it. Whenever you're talking about high performance equipment, whether it's able body or para, it has to fit, has to be completely custom, and everyone is so much different than the other person that it's hard to give advice for these sorts of things. So anyways, one of my things, I'm going to share my screen here and show you something that I built for one of my teammates. It had a pretty bad end to it, but can you guys see my screen? Just a couple nods. Yeah, sweet. So basically this is it. So he has this old chair. It doesn't fit him. I don't think it ever fit him. And he can't use his legs. So as you can see here, there's no foot plate on the bottom. So his feet kind of just dangle there. We were trying to figure out a way where we could use that energy. So if you think about the biomechanics of wheelchair basketball, or really just pushing in any sort of wheelchair, there's a lot of movement, forward and back movement. Anywhere that there's moving parts, your body included, you're losing energy in those places. So because this gentleman can't push himself back up into his seat, he's constantly trying to adjust his like seating position during play because he can't push himself back. He has to use his hands. Because he's using his hands, I mean, that's wasted energy. That is energy to put him back in the chair as opposed to propel him forward. So basically we designed this chair for him for this little bracket. And what I did was I just drilled kind of a hole in the bottom of a bracket that I already had and put a pipe across and did the same thing on the other side. It's pretty basic. However, there was no way for him to try this design. There's nothing without him getting a new chair, or, you know, and like, it'll probably be 2-3 iterations of this, because if you do weld it to a specific spot, it's stuck in that spot. So we made this. It actually did end up breaking, I'm pretty sure, recently, as you can see here. So I just used a copper pipe that I found at Home Depot because I'm ghetto like that. And yeah, what I would like to do, or what would be really awesome, is to create this modular system for seating. So this could go for any wheelchair. Imagine something that has these like sort of clamps, but you can customize them however they want. And it has to be quite lightweight, and it has to be able to support the body weight of whoever the user is. So that, you know, that could range from whatever, 20 pounds a child to 250 to 300 pounds. And you have to keep that weight into the back of the chair. There's a lot of people that are starting to use this. It's kind of a newer, I don't want to say it's not a newer technology, but the sport doesn't change as fast as technology changes. And, you know, certain sports take a little while to get into newer tech stuff. Not that this is super high tech, but I think it would be interesting to see tennis players as well, like wheelchair tennis. They use lots of these. They use that custom like knee orthotic to hold their body in. So my idea was to make something like that. And then after we kind of decided on what spot that it would go, then we would do the final iteration. So we would put an aluminum bar exactly in the spot that he needs and at the exact angle that he needs, because his knees have to be at a certain angle for him to, I don't know, be able to push himself back up without it hurting. So this is kind of like where my orthotics experience came in handy. So I used orthotic foam to foam and build up where his knees are to relieve pressure. I didn't do a final job because I wanted to wait for the final iteration of this, which is probably coming. But I thought this would be a cool design. And I don't think it just applies to basketball chairs, but if you thought you could use it for, let's say people have a femoral discrepancy, like a leg length discrepancy, and they have their feet down on the ground, you have to have a 2-tiered foot plate for them. If there was some sort of modular system where you could just retrofit chairs to be more customizable and to be better for the user, I think this would go a really long way in the amount of people that get experience doing these sports and have a good experience. Because, you know, the first time you come out and play, you're in this crappy chair that someone's handed to you that's 3 sizes too big, and there's no customization to it, and, you know, you don't play to your potential. It really does hold you back, and it is a sport that the equipment absolutely can hold you back. So that was my one project that I want to talk about, and then I have one more that I'll talk about before I hand it off to the next person. So I made a socket for myself. All socket designs are a little bit different. Generally, they're quadrilateral sockets without any windows in any parts of the socket. So here you can see there's a window on that left side of the socket there. So I made this because there's volume fluctuation. A lot of amputees have this volume fluctuation happening. And what we do is we use socks. So, you know, if you gain a little bit of weight, you use a little bit less socks. So you have that same snug fit every time. Some people have to change this during the course of the day. And that's sort of where this system comes in. And it's a basic that like a BOA system that you might find in a ski boot or a snowboard boot. And what it does is there's this knob that you put on at the end here. I just cosmetically finished it, and basically all it does is it pulls those two compartments together. Now, the issue with this is it only pulls two compartments together. So you have two static sides and two that are moving. When you change one angle, it changes the whole angle of how your femur is sitting in the socket. So this is a challenge. For some people, it's fine. I have my full femur, so I have quite a bit of control. So it's okay for me, but for someone that has large volume fluctuations during the day or trouble getting on and off flights, it would be interesting if there would be a method that you could compress the entirety of like circumferentially around the leg as opposed to just this section. So as opposed to it just going through this one window, the entire thing would maybe, vacuum form. It's in prosthetics, we use vacuum forming for pretty much anything. If you want to drape plastic on anything, you use a vacuum to put pressure on the cast so you can get all the bony prominences and all these things. Conceptually, it would be interesting if we could have the same thing on a prosthetic. One, you could alleviate any pressure if you have, whether you gain weight or you lose weight. And there would be total body contact. So there's like hydraulic forces of your leg. If it doesn't fit properly, sometimes you get edema, you get blood pooling at the bottom of your limb. You don't want that. So the way sockets are designed is to have this full body contact. But when you have all these volume fluctuations, which is a regular part of being an amputee, it becomes a challenge. It absolutely becomes a challenge. So anyways, I made this for myself. I just put a foam here to finish it. It doesn't look super finished, but anyways, I've had a pretty good experience with it. There's that flexible liner inside, and so when it compresses that flexible liner. I've been pretty happy with it, but it would be super cool if it would be circumferential as opposed to just a section. So anyways, that's my only ideas for tonight. Sorry if I went over time, but I'll hand it over to the next speaker.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing both of those designs there. That's really cool. I myself, who's an amputee, would love to pick your brain at the Q&A session after everyone's done presenting, because I've changed multiple socks just already today. But I think that opens the floor for our next guest, which is Meg, if you are comfortable with going. Good?
Oh yeah, bring it on. It's great to be here tonight. Thank you for this opportunity to join you. I think my education and professional careers, as well as my athletic career, really, it's all about engineering. I think I've always been geeking out on the biomechanics of sport. I grew up in Canada initially, riding horses, chasing cows in Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, if anyone knows where that is. Wow, you do? You know where Rocky is? Okay, well, it is like...
I've never been. I heard about it, but I've never been.
Okay, well, we now have a stop sign. I remember when we got on a McDonald's. It's grown quite a bit, but it's quite a small town. And I now live in Missoula, Montana. Before then, I went to Chicago. So I always joke that I speak fluent Canadian and deep dish pizza. So anyway, I came to Montana initially to play tennis. So you go into the geekiness of a tennis racket, or, my passion, the sport of having a stick in your hand and beating a ball back and forth. It's a thing. But I'd always see people like riding bikes and racing triathlons thinking, how can a body do such a thing? Between my freshman and sophomore years, when I was 19, I was involved in a rollover car accident. Our car rolled 8.5 times when we were driving from Chicago to Montana. And in that car accident, my partner died, and I was really hurt. I had had my foot literally ripped off, but I'd gotten my head smashed in, and I was in a coma. And I have to say, being in a coma, not so bad. It's really quite peaceful. I don't remember it. And really living is the hard part, right, guys? So woke up and had a lot more to deal with. Ended up having, going from a below calcaneus. So I had my heel bone, had my full intact leg and my calcaneus, and where they took muscle from my stomach and skin from my thigh to cover that hole where my foot had been. So if we talk about biomechanics and lever arms, it was great. I had a long lever, awesome. but I had a dysfunctional foot and pain. So 11 months after my first amputation, I actually had my second amputation. And so I'm one of those lucky people that got to lose their leg twice. But again, if you think about prosthetics or engineering, while I went from a longer lever arm to a shorter lever arm, I then went to cooler prosthetics, ones that have more carbon, more dynamic ability. My first prosthesis literally was a ski boot. And I don't know, since you guys are in Indiana, do you know what skiing is? Do you need me to explain it? Are you familiar? Again, being from Chicago, I have to give everyone in Indiana as much crap as possible. Okay, I have to. It's okay. Moving on. Okay, so yeah, ski boot dysfunctional, and I wanted to run. I wanted to be dynamic. I went again from being a college tennis player, where we played Division I tennis here in Montana, even in Montana, wanting to be more active. 11 months after my second amputation, I did my first triathlon. And if you've seen running blades, they have made enormous strides, quite literally, in their function. From the blades are getting longer, they're getting more dynamic, they're getting multiple bends in them, like this. And this is actually one of the older ones. So instead of just a straight C, they're changing the mounting. And so just out of curiosity, is mostly engineering students? Are we like any pre-med students? Or like what? I can't. Engineering.
Mainly engineer, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like biomedical engineering. I mean, we can think about all of these things. Yeah, sweet.
Yeah.
Very cool. I mean, when you think about osteointegration, how that would be creating a bony prosthetic junction, and again with the intention of making a better lever arm. Yeah, biomechanical engineering. And so they went to direct mounted prostheses versus like prosthetics that connect with a bolt. So I apologize if you guys all know these things, like we've already talked about prostheses, but those are all things that we think about, and trying to make this socket fit as intimately with a person as possible. Because you were taking, like when you pick up your feet, all you bipedal people, I'm sorry, I've got lots of sun apparently in Montana right now. Hold on. Okay, pardon. So when you have 2 feet, when you pick up your foot goes with you. Mine doesn't. It first you pick up my limb, and then my prosthesis goes with me. And so they're always looking at ways to make better suspension. It's not like the suspension in your car or in your bike. It's how your limb is suspended. People will use a sleeve that they roll onto their leg, either sometimes with a pin, so it's kind of like buckling your seatbelt, or a lot of them will use also a suspension sleeve, and it is not really that high tech. It just rolls up your limb, whether it's your arm or your leg, and then the friction. Ever heard of it? It's pretty old school. Okay, don't skip that chapter. It's important. Friction keeps your socket on. But what is happening? You always have gravity pulling you down. What are the shapes of all of your limbs? Conical, broader at the proximally, narrower distally. So everything is trying to fall off. And if you're athletic, you sweat. What does sweat do? Decrease coefficient of friction. Where does your leg go? Off. Okay. And so things to think about with biomedical engineering and so forth, you can think about something like a sweat gland. People use Botox to paralyze sweat glands. What are other things that aren't chemical? Or some of those antiperspirants, those are some scary stuff, dude. Like, okay, I challenge you to solve the problem of sweat, okay? Step 1. Going back to my story. So I raced triathlon initially. I went on to racing for Team USA triathlon for a while. I did off-road triathlon and road triathlon. I was the first female challenge athlete to ever do off-road triathlon. Super fun, open water swimming, mountain biking, trail running, very fun. Highly recommend it. From there, I did 24-hour mountain bike racing, and mountain bikes love engineers. I mean, you guys have to like the 26-inch wheel to the 29-inch wheel. Now they've gone maybe a 27.5. I don't know, 29, what do you do? Wider tire, bigger tire, you know, we can go on and on. Your suspension, 140 millimeters, 90, 100. People go on and on. How the angles of your bike. I could spend a lot of time waxing poetic about the bike. I ended up racing for Team USA as a paracyclist. And as great as wheelchair sports are, I gotta say cycling is even more empirical. I'm biased, okay? But I really enjoy the objective numbers that you can get on a bike. They have power taps. How cool is that? You have a speedometer, an odometer, a heart rate monitor. And so you can really geek out on all these objective measures beyond. I mean, it's awesome to actually have an opponent to race against or compete against, like basketball. But when you're racing on a bike, my favorite thing was the time trial, where it's just you against the bike. And I love what in French they call it contre la montre, which means like against the clock. And that's really what it is. It's just you, a course, and the clock. And then it really goes down to your engineering, like who takes the better line, who is more aerodynamic, who keeps their cadence, their gearing, on and on and on. Okay. From there, I got injured. So this gets the biomechanical aspect of it. Who has a leg length discrepancy here in the crowd? Everybody should raise their hand. Who is actually a perfect mirror? No one. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm the first one to tell you this. I'm sorry. But you are not symmetrical side to side. You are not Tom Cruise, or he's not symmetrical, right? Everyone knows that. You're not Julia Roberts or whatever measure of beauty or that you think of. So everybody is different side to side. So you can think about leg length discrepancy. I use mismatched crank arms. So my bike, the legs, the arms that your pedal attaches to are different because I ride with a biking prosthesis like this. This is something you ordered a carbon bar, and then my friend took sheets of carbon and just laid this over a form, and he made this in his garage. So nothing as fancy as Nick made, but it is every bit as functional. Like you can just get components like this anywhere. So this is just a pyramid. This is a socket I was using. And because I'm so tough, I have to have protective. Hold on, this was not part of the act. Oh, it's broken. Okay. But I have a protective cover over on the outside with a softer inner thing, because it turns out this thing is like $900. Okay. That. And when I fall down, it breaks. If I just like kneel, it breaks. So find a way to make this little thing less expensive. Please, I beg you. You will help so many people. Okay.
Universal healthcare. It's easy. Come on.
I could go on, but we don't, not enough time. Okay. So I also represent an organization called the Range of Motion Project, because 90% of amputees worldwide don't have access to adequate medical care or prosthetics care. And when you think, I mean, North America, we are tremendously lucky to have access to healthcare, whether it be universal or independent. We're also have universities and programs like you guys are going to change the world. You don't even know it yet. You're still babies, many of you. Some of you are a little older, teaching the babies. Thank you. But 90% of the world doesn't have access to stuff like this. I mean, they don't, let alone this, all right, let alone like a walking leg, okay? They don't have that, right? So finding out like 3D printing limbs, I'm definitely going over time. You got me going. Anyway, I'm a physical therapist, and I'm hugely passionate about helping people get moving, stay moving. Because again, it's physics, right? Third law, object in motion stays in motion, something along those lines. So thank you for what you're doing. I'm catching myself because I talk too much. But I am really excited by what you're doing and to be here and to join you and to kind of share my journey as well as my prostheses. Because I think what you see, what you see with Nick's prostheses will greatly influence the world. My strong belief is that we're all more capable than we know. And it's not until we have these adversities or these challenges or problems in front of us do we realize how capable we all are. Whether it's, you put off writing that paper and all of a sudden, wow, you wrote 5 pages overnight. Like that's one obstacle to overcome, let alone, a car accident or brain trauma or cancer or all of these things. I've been very fortunate to stand on the top steps, dance with D'Artagnan at the Olympians and Paralympians parties. He can dance, you guys, like he can move. So I'm just really pleased to be here with you tonight. And if you'd like to find me, I'm on Instagram. That's probably easiest. We're all there. You can also reach out to me, gomegfisher@gmail.com, gomegfisher.com. I would love to hear what you're figuring out. And if you have any questions and want to problem solve anything, I'm eager. So thank you for your time.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for saying all those things, and you hit a few good points for me as well, because this thing is really terrible. So I would like to see a fix there as well. It's funny, when they came up to me and they asked me questions about what do you need to be fixed, or what problems do you have as an amputee every day, I didn't know really what to say, because like, where do I start? But just you talking about that, and Nick in the first one, like it hits home that there's a lot of things that need to be changed. And that's why we're here today. So it's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I will open the floor to D'Artagnan now, if you would like to go for it.
Yep, absolutely. Just like everyone else, super grateful to be here. And yeah, thank you all for your time. Thank you all for showing up. I will say that I think I'm the furthest away from engineering than anyone else here. I definitely have a lot of interest in it, because absolutely see so many amazing things come out of it, especially having a career in the Paralympic world. Because I didn't grow up knowing that like there was a Paralympic world or having much access to it. And so when I finally got into it and saw all of the means to get people mobile, I thought that was just really cool. And it just made me really appreciate the science and the people who are creative and intellectual and put that stuff together. So thank you guys for what you do. Thank you guys for, making a challenge to improve upon what's already been created. So yeah, thank you guys so much. To just kind of get started with my story, I'm, like the bio says, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. And my journey into sports wasn't like a lot of people's. I had no inclination to ever join a sports team. It was never anything that was on my horizon, nothing that like I really planned on doing. And that was because I was a choir kid and I was a gamer, and that was it. And it wasn't until middle school, maybe around my 7th grade year, where on my way home from getting food from this fast food place, I was attacked and robbed, and thought I was going to lose my life. And I wasn't a stranger to traumatic events or abuse or anything terrifying at that point, but that was, I guess you could say, was the straw that not only broke the camel's back, but replaced the camel with a bigger, stronger, faster, buffer camel. I immediately after I got home, it felt like that entire night itself lasted days. But by the time I finally scraped myself off the ground after the incident and got myself home, there was a moment when I was crossing through. So my house, as I used to live in it, I always entered through the back door. And so in the back door, there was an entrance as you let in. One entrance led upstairs and the other entrance led into our house. I got into the back door, and from that entrance to the door of my house, it may have been 6 feet. It felt like an entire journey there, because there was a lot that I was processing with. And there was a lot of me that also felt like it was slowly dying and just kind of falling apart, as I was also desperately trying to cling to something else that I wasn't sure was there or not. And so after that, I made a decision. The feeling came to me that like I never wanted to feel that helpless or hopeless ever again. And so by the time I got to high school, I had already gone through the motions on trying to figure out what it is that I was going to do to not feel that hopeless. First, the idea of joining a game popped into my head. And like, even when I played video games, I was a solo gamer. So I didn't really want to party up with anybody. And then the idea of buying a gun popped into my head because that just seemed like a good way of protection. But immediately, like as soon as that idea like crossed my mind, I also knew I'd seen enough gun violence. I'd been bared witness to it. I'd been shot at enough times to know that that'll just bring me a quicker death. And so when I got to high school, when I saw adults, you know, I'm going to explain to Steve from my perspective. When I got to high school and saw adults teaching kids how to be strong, fast, and how to fight, I saw that as my opportunity to level up. I saw that as my opportunity to gain experience, not necessarily be a great athlete, but to survive my environment. And when I didn't know how to put language to this when I was going through it. So this was just me looking at things that like, oh, this will help me survive. This will help me survive. But when I was able to like retire from my career, my full athletic career, so 16 years of being an athlete, just only from high school up through my Paralympic journey. After I retired, I was able to sit with a more nuanced view of like why I joined those sports. I was a 4-sport athlete in high school, and I was on a powerlifting team because I needed to be the strongest. That was it. I just needed to be the strongest. But at the same time, I knew that I also wasn't always going to be the strongest. There's always going to be someone stronger. So track came in, helping me become faster if I wasn't the strongest. And when being strong and fast wasn't gonna do it for me, wrestling and football showed me grit and how to kick ass, and I ran with those. And that's what kind of opened up, not kind of, but really opened up my opportunity in the Paralympic sport. Because I stuck with wrestling and my story kind of gained traction in the Cleveland newspaper. Me and a friend, we were both featured in this ESPN documentary called Carry On. And while the documentary had the overlying arch of sport in it, of two physically limited wrestlers, one being visually impaired, myself, and the other being a double amputee, Leroy, our story that really, the part of our story that really resonated wasn't necessarily the sports that we had done, but our friendship. And to just be fully blunt and transparent, our story was two black men, two black young boys who had been through hell, had maybe some of the worst hands dealt, and still showed up with love, still showed up with compassion. And then the story was called Carry On, that resonated with people because I physically carried them on my back. And that's actually gonna like trigger. At first I came in here not knowing that, like, I have no idea what I'm gonna like tell you guys. I actually had an idea from an English paper that I wrote, and I'll share that with you too, which has nothing to do with sports, but more environmental causes. But I think that engineers can absolutely work on something like this. And again, it's not something I know if it's done. It's definitely not my own original idea, but I'll share that once I get through the story. And so after that documentary aired, we were both given just tremendous opportunities to get out of Cleveland. And that was just such a huge blessing for us because Cleveland was just a place where I thought I was going to die. Cleveland was a place where I thought that dreams just went there to die because I lived so secluded in a small bubble. And so when I got out to Colorado and saw that this big world of Paralympics and Olympics, I was so overwhelmed that it translated into underwhelmment inside of me, if that makes any sense to you guys. And while like it was easy to kind of get starstruck by all the things going on, like my entire goal was still to survive. So even through my athletic career in judo, I just kind of kept running from one thing to the next and still not having a real roadmap for my life. Judo just kind of like fit because I was already a really good wrestler. And wrestling was that sport that I really connected with because it was also through wrestling where I met my friend Leroy, met my brother Leroy, and so many other people, and like really found that I'm really, really good at something. I'm really talented at something. And even though like I again initially joined up with it for survival purposes. Like, it was still something that gave me a lot of gratitude, because it helped me see myself in a different light that life had not shown me that I was capable of standing in. And so, again, going through my career, seeing that, like, this is still just survival, running from one thing to the next, I, at some point in my career, found the biggest cup of gratitude I could find, and I chugged it. And then I just kept drinking that cup of gratitude every day. And it was because that I switched the mindset from survival to gratitude. I'm just grateful to be in my gi, fighting a bunch of dudes, hanging with some of the best athletes in the world. And I'm just this kid from Cleveland. And I was just so grateful to be there and just have that opportunity. And the words come to me when I think of this. For so much of my life, I felt forgotten by the world. And in so many beautiful moments through my career, I stood on top of it. Having shocked the world only 2 years into my career, being a bronze medalist for the London Paralympic Games, moving up a weight class that I wasn't even close to being. I started in judo at 178 pounds, so 81 kilos. But I didn't qualify that weight class because I came in late, a lot of unexperienced. So for the end of 2011, going into 2012, I knew in my mind that I wasn't going to make it. Going into 2012, that year, my coach, however, Ed Liddy, approached me and said, "Hey, just so you know, I'm not going to take no for an answer unless you have a serious concern, but there's a chance for you to go to London. And this is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to go to senior nationals. You're going to have to win senior nationals in the higher weight division, which was a 20-pound jump. And you're going to have to beat the number one guy in a best 2 out of 3 round." And I, without even thinking of the weight, the new weight class, anything else, I told him, "Well, yeah, of course I'm doing that. Yeah, that's happening. Yes, of course, yes." And so going through that year was also a pivotal point for me, because, again, still having a lot of doubt, although I was still carrying it really well. I was carrying my doubt and my worry and my trauma still very well. I also knew that I had an opportunity to do something that was monumental. Like, I didn't even care if it was monumental for the world or anyone else. It was monumental for me. And it was just such a beautiful journey to even be a part of. And I also found myself as a 2014 world champion, and then winning my second bronze medal in Rio. And then after my retirement, it sort of fizzled out, but in a way that was kind of, I should have done this sooner, because I got to a point in my career where I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I was still struggling mentally with all of the emotional scars and trauma that I dealt with growing up, but I was also still grateful. But that gratitude dropped off because I began getting desperate, because I wasn't making any money. Like, as you guys know, especially in America, there's no money in Paralympic sport. And had I not had the beautiful blessing of being able to stay on complex, I wouldn't have been able to do the sport, especially in the beginning, because I didn't have any sponsors, didn't have anyone who knew who I was. And it's also really hard to get sponsorship for judo and also Paralympics, and just Paralympic sport in general, when the general consensus is that Paralympic sports is Special Olympics. So I've seen so many things where people would say, "Well, we're not going to donate to Paralympics because we've already donated to Special Olympics," and it's the same thing. And so that hinders us for, like, that fundraising. And also, just as a judo athlete, like, even able-bodied judo. And I have some qualms with that word. Even, like, those of us who have more severe limitations than others, I've seen people who are quadriplegic or a quad amputee who are more able-bodied than any person who has no physical limitation. So I'm still sitting with that word. I don't like it, and I also don't like the word disability, which is why I won't use it here, because, yeah, it's just not a word I like to use to describe, like, people who are just physically limited. It doesn't mean that they're disabled or not able to accomplish or do anything. But that's a different soapbox story for another time. Moving through my transition, again, moving through it without any more gratitude, more with desperation, trying to get the funding because rules changed. I ended up ending my career with a potential career-ending injury. I had an injured rib going into Turkey for a World Cup. And because I, again, fighting out of desperation, not fighting for the reasons that I loved the sport, I ended up fighting against that injury, fighting against myself, and getting thrown on my head and becoming paralyzed in Turkey for about 4 hours. Terrifying experience. And like my friend told me like what happened in the video, and like I went down and just like my body went stiff as a board like when I went down on my head. And like I'm not sure how long I was out, but I definitely like came to and had no feeling whatsoever in my right leg and in my left leg and right arm. But my right leg had some numbness and my left arm had some tingling. And yeah, I had no idea. It was all over. I had no idea what was going to happen next, how it was going to happen. And after that trip, after getting back, thankfully there was nothing too wrong. It just seems, because we ran tests, and after talking to a doctor about like, and explaining how I landed, said it sounds like when you landed on the top of your head, your spine and everything crunched, and you just pinched some nerves that just shut off the signal to the rest of your body for a moment. And I didn't know that was a thing and could happen, and then you can just walk away from that. But I felt truly blessed and grateful that I was able to walk away. However, when I walked away, and also to use another analogy, when I got out of this souped up sports car that I was just speeding along this open road for so long, once that guard ran out of gas and I got out of it, there was a mess of trash that I had to clean up, which was just a crazy mess of my life, of trauma, bad mistakes, and just mental health and emotional health issues. And so transitioning into retirement, I still struggled with who D'Artagnan was outside of the gi, who D'Artagnan was when the lights were off and nobody was coming to watch me fight some guy in my pajamas. Like I had no idea who I was or what to even be in that. And so because of my background, because of where I thought I wanted to head in life, I jumped into social work. So right after I retired, I jumped into a social work degree because I thought making some sort of impact or learning more about substance abuse, because I had seen it, I had experienced it, struggled with my own substance abuse disorder for a while after retirement. And so I needed to know, I needed information to figure out, how do I combat this? How do I heal from this? And so I got to a point where social work it still wasn't doing it for me. And then I changed my major to sociology. But in doing that, I kind of found a calling in sociology that led me into trauma research. That led me into, more particularly, childhood trauma. Because again, there was a lot about me that I didn't understand and that I needed to know. And I also knew I needed to heal. And that led me into becoming a teacher, which I said that I would never do all of my life, because so much of my trauma happened in those very informative years of elementary through middle school. And because after I emerged from my career, what really made me struggle was the fact that I was bombarded with 7 years of repressed memories that I had no idea how to manage, had no language for, had no coping skills, had no understanding of what even was happening. It just seemed like a bunch of crazy nightmares that were making me go insane. And so like moving toward a psychotic break, I found myself in a very vulnerable position while taking a teacher role, because I was still healing, but I took a teacher role in education when I said I would never go back to that place ever. But what was so beautiful was I fell in love with it on my first day. I fell in love with the job like on my first day, because everything that life has taught me, everything that had happened to me, taught me how to interact with children in a way that spoke to them and helped them really achieve something. And so again, with this teaching role, it was more of an after school teaching setting. And then I knew that like, I want to begin like learning more and teaching emotional intelligence. I want that to be my life. I want to give people those particular tools to succeed when life hits you, or if you have childhood trauma, to take control that you don't feel like you have, because your emotions, your thoughts, and your body, because something I've really learned with my own experience is trauma lives in the body. And there's a wonderful book called The Body Keeps Score that really teaches you how to give compassion to yourself, but also compassion and love to those around you, to everyone around you, because you don't know anyone's story. You don't know everyone's story and what they might be carrying. And it just teaches you how to walk through the world in a gentleness. And after like having that realization that this is what I wanted to do, I started scraping by myself from the bottom of this barrel that I was in. And I started taking control over my healing, because what was kind of going back to that healthcare discussion, I didn't have healthcare. After I retired from being an athlete, I stopped mattering to Team USA, no healthcare, and no access to a counselor, no access to anyone to help me with the emotional damage that I had. However, I was in school, and I was an athlete that knew how to get things done, that knew how to be self-motivated. I didn't have access to a doctor, but I had access to everything doctors read and study. And so I used the Auraria campus library, which is just a database of a bunch of, like just any school database of all the peer-led articles and everything like that. Every chance I got for every class, whether it was an elective or just my core class, I coupled it with some sort of trauma lesson. I tried to fit trauma into my understanding of everything, because I felt like it was all affected by it. And then sociology really gave me additional nuanced language to speak to it. And so as I began making more strides in this career of education, but more importantly, education through emotional intelligence, I ended up finding myself where I'm at now. And so currently I'm a program manager for Yes Institute, and it's a nonprofit that was established over about 20 years ago, actually, in Denver. And it's a full year-long curriculum that teaches emotional intelligence in such a beautiful way. Like, the curriculum meets people where they are, and it's a curriculum that adults would get just as much, if not more, out of it than students. Because it's a curriculum that meets you where you are. And now I'm in a position where I'm moving back to Cleveland to help take care of my father, but I'm also potentially moving into a role that I'm helping create with the CEO, which would be a director of expansion. And in that role, I would just use every skill that I've learned from being an athlete and having to be my own entrepreneur, my own agent, and my own everything through that and also like from like my career as a speaker too. I've built a career as a speaker and I love it. And I kind of reaching back just a bit, I thought that I was going to build this career of speaking from like for myself, but all of the resources that I built for it, turns out that they're all going to be for Yes. And I plan on like using that to expand Yes, not only domestically, but internationally as well. And kind of switching gears back to, those engineering projects. My friend, brother Leroy, he is he is a double amputee. And I guess the challenge is he's amputated below the knee, but also at the hip, like high up on the hip. And he's never really had a good pair of prosthetics, because he's never had a prosthetic that could like fit, like cup, like if you take your leg off here, like this is where like where he's amputated at. And so he's never been able to like walk on prosthetics, because he's never had a comfortable pair that he could actually stand on for a longer than 10 minutes without being in pain with it grinding up. So like a hip socket, some kind of prosthetic that can hold the hip while still providing comfort for a double amputee, because all of his weight is kind of coming down in two different areas on two different points of contact, and both of them being two completely different surface areas and how to mold that. So I guess a pair of prosthetics for being cut at the knee, like right below the knee where there's like, I guess like a little one of those things, but then like high up on the hip as well. And the thing I thought about, which again, I did a research paper on this in an English class, where has nothing to do with sports, but more environmental, where underwater turbines that were like underwater windmills, like put very far under the ocean, like in an area where it doesn't really like mess with marine life, but used in like where there's a constant current to generate an unlimited renewable source of energy. I think there was a school in Florida that had started like maybe prototype or just started like a deep research into it, because I had enough information to get an A on a paper in English for this particular project with the research that I'd done. but it always sat with me that like that's a really good idea. That's a cool idea for a renewable source of energy, like windmills underwater that generate a renewable source of energy. Like that's cool. And now that I have you all here in this meeting, then I think that would just be just a good suggestion to just throw out there to, I guess, as many powerful minds as I can, to like just maybe that becomes something to give us more sustainable energy. And I guess to conclude, thank you guys again for your time. And one of the biggest takeaways from my whole career, not only as an athlete, but as a student athlete and then like years beforehand, is there came a point in my life where I realized everything for better or for worse, everything I endured, everything I struggled with, every wrong, every right decision that I made is all working for my good, because I made a decision to heal, because I made a decision to take control over my emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical health in a way that I never thought was possible. And yeah, thank you guys again for your time. And I really appreciate being here, being able to share my story and give some ideas on engineering and how, again, you guys can continue to just shape the world in a beautiful way, making movement and mobility accessible to those who don't otherwise have it, especially when there's a huge financial concern. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much, D'Artagnan. I really appreciate you telling the story and sharing one of three very unique stories that we heard tonight. And all three panelists brought something to the table that very unique that we can work off of, and that we're very excited to hear. But firstly, I just want to thank all three of you guys for sharing and coming out. You guys have all thanked us for coming out, but you guys are the ones to thank for coming out. So I really appreciate that. That gives us a lot of room to move forward with individual questions. And anyone that has questions, you can put them in the chat and I will take care of them. I see a few questions right over there in the chat right now. Ryan asked the first question. If you want to just read the question out of the chat, I'll actually read it for everyone that can, that isn't looking at the chat. Ryan says, this is a question mostly for Meg, but anyone can provide input. How would you suggest connecting with and designing adaptive equipment for the 90% of individuals who do not have access / cannot afford equipment? That's a very good question, Ryan. Thank you for asking that. Meg, I'll leave it to you. And if anyone has anything else to go off of that, go for it.
Right on. So just below that, I put a link to the Range of Motion Project, which is the organization that I've partnered with. They're based out of Guatemala and Ecuador, and they provide access to individuals outside of the US. Not to say that individuals in the US have unlimited access to prosthetics. Au contraire, most people are allowed to have one prosthesis or one wheelchair. You get to choose a prosthesis or a wheelchair for your mobility. But that's a whole nother healthcare question. Nick, I know, universal healthcare, I know, okay, I know. But as far as designing prostheses, that is where educations like orthotics and prosthetics offers a lot of ideas. However, that is not the only way to do it. When do most, unfortunately, okay, most amputees, people who suffer limb loss, are 65 and older and are diabetic. Okay, at least in the United States. Outside of the US, that's a different population. So that said, designing prostheses is going to be different for different populations. Moving on, so if we're thinking about individuals outside of the United States, sorry, switching gears again, individuals similar to me or Nick, like traumatic or amputations following an illness like cancer, tend to have the higher activity levels and needing, dare I say, like the fancy prostheses. Like they're going to have the running prostheses. They're going to want the biking specific legs, because notice like this foot does not look like this foot, which does not look like the foot that you all have in your feet. And I don't use a biking shoe. Okay. So how are people going to end up with feet like this? It's because of people like you who say, what's out there, that's not good enough. I'm going to go into my garage. I'm going to take a piece of carbon pylon and some carbon webbing, and I'm going to make my own vacuum bladder or a wet carbon layup. And I'm going to make something that's better, whether it's using the diabetic foam or foam to build up a wheelchair or what have you. Long story short, connect with organizations like the Range in Motion Project. They are a group of prosthetists, and they would have even more resources as how to reach out to the broader population. There are other organizations like the Range of Motion Project. They're not the only one. There'll be people who focus on people all over the world. So that's just one idea. So find something like them and then spread the good.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that right there. We have another question in the chat, and it is from Joanna. She says, what innovation is happening at ROMP? I know they rely a lot on donations. If you could answer that one as well for me.
Yeah,
please.
so they make a lot of 3D printed limbs. That's a new process for them. And that's something that's up and coming worldwide as far as access to a device to create a 3D printed object. And then, yes, Range of Motion Project does rely on a lot of donations, 100%. But they're trying to push those innovations. People are scanning limbs now with apps on tablets and then creating 3D models off of that. I'm sure that's old news to all of you engineering people, but I got to play with that this year and I thought, wow, how cool. Okay, so use that, carry that forward. But then, 3D printing. And I think going back to kind of D'Artagnan and going back to like Nick's legs, I'm just kind of generalizing here. It's all about the lever arm. That's really an easy concept. So you're always trying to capture as much of somebody's lever arm in order to transfer energy into whether it's their grasp, their reach, their step, their stride, their standing tolerance. So just, I guess, revert back to the really simple stuff like leverage. It's pretty cool. It's super powerful.
Thank you. That's awesome. I also want to go back to when D'Artagnan was talking, the little that was very funny. I just wanted to just laugh about that. Because I never know I'm an amputee and I don't even know what to call it. But yeah, I just thought that was pretty funny. Wanted to bounce back to that one.
Yeah.
I have a question directed towards. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
I'm going to step on my soapbox for a second. So working in healthcare, a lot of times we take it upon as healthcare professionals to name somebody's limb for them. That is not anyone's here, even not as a professional, healthcare professional, to do that. You do not get to name somebody else's limb. You do not get to, you just don't. Some people are okay with the word stump. True. Okay. That is actually old school. A lot of people don't. For instance, no, I don't like that. Not even a little bit. Residual limb is the anatomical term. That's about this long, and it's a lot to say. So if you were to ask me, since I do not have my left foot, if you were to ask me how my left leg is doing, I think I get it. Okay. So like you can say, how is your right leg? How is your right knee? How is your left foot? How is your right hand? That person's limb is still their right side or their left side. And if they choose to name it something else, like I work with somebody who lost their right foot, they like to call their limb Carl. Okay. If you want to call it Carl, cool. I will call it Carl. But that is not my job to do. So anyway, that's my soapbox as professionals moving forward. Always ask somebody what's okay for them. All right, thank you. Stepping off, all yours.
Thank you. We have another question in the chat. Somebody asked, war-ridden countries or countries in post-war era, are any idea how to reach those populations? I assume we're going back to the 90% that we were talking about earlier, and the universal healthcare comments that we also have tossed around. Yes.
Somebody else want to jump on that, Nick? Crush it.
Yeah, I'll say something about that, I guess. So I was born in former Yugoslavia. I came as a refugee. So I kind of know a little bit, and I have friends still there that some will have amputations and other disabilities and stuff like that. And it's education is one thing. It's like social media has changed the game completely. Whether it's prosthetics, wheelchairs, whatever it is, like everywhere in the world. I was working in a clinic the other day. We were trying to figure out a flexible. So the socket, usually sockets are hard. We wanted to make the entire thing flexible, like absolutely no hard. And they have this polyurethane resin that achieves that someone made in Slovenia using some weird procedure, but I would not have known it if it wasn't for Instagram. So what the clinic actually ended up buying this urethane foam, and I don't know how it's going to work out, but hopefully good. The results look pretty good for them. Social media has changed the game like big time. So I think there's been much more exposure. It's funding, like everything is funding. When it comes to Paralympic, like it's money. Yeah, cash is king, however Lewis Hamilton said. Like that's just how it is. My experience on the Canadian wheelchair basketball team and the experience I would have had on, let's say, the Serbian wheelchair national team is completely different. Even like you go from the city, like the city's war torn, it's not accessible whatsoever. So I don't know that, to be honest with you, I don't know how to answer that question, because I feel like if there was an answer, then this wouldn't have been an issue or a question. So I think there's just a larger problem there. And then I see a second question here directed toward me. The snowboard like pull cords, can you explain more of the results of that? Was it comfortable compared to the regular sleeve? It was more comfortable. So I usually have a hard socket. I've never had a flexible liner inside. I'm above knee amputee, not like Meg and D'Artagnan. So my needs are a little bit different. The way I can tolerate pressures and stuff like that are a little bit different. I have my entire femur, so I can take my full weight through the bottom of my socket. But the flexible liner definitely makes a huge, huge difference. Now, there is problems that come with that. So like you can make the most comfortable socket, prosthetic, whatever it is, but how functional would it be? So because I have my full femur, I put a flexible liner in that adds probably 2 to 8 mils. Then I have a resin that goes over this socket as well, which adds another, let's say, centimeter. Then you have your socket adapter and you have this and that. So I sit down in a chair, and with a flexible liner, although it is more comfortable, my knee protrudes much farther, almost 5 inches than my other knee. So it looks like I have a leg length discrepancy, but because of all these nice features, the socket is longer than it has to be. So I have 2 sockets. One's a little bit more low profile, where the knees are like almost symmetrical, almost thing. And yeah, that would be like, you got to sacrifice something. It would be nice if there was a way, like what I was talking about before, to not sacrifice these things. Like even, like Meg's leg that she uses for biking. Like, would you ever walk with that? I can't imagine it's super comfortable. Like there's no flex to it or anything like that. So like, this is, like, it's so specific to, yeah.
The peg leg. It literally is a pirate peg leg. I call it my duck foot. All right. You step on it, but it's really efficient. So all the energy, like, I put into my pedal goes straight there. Whereas if I had this, springs. Anyway, yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So it's very specific. There is knees that do a lot more than other knees and stuff like that. I'm just in the process of getting a microprocessor knee. Just to put in perspective, the knee, just the knee unit, so like not the foot, not the pylon, not the socket, nothing, was about $65,000 Canadian, which is, I don't know, whatever, $45,000 to $50,000 American.
$5 US, you guys. It's $5.
Oh, we haven't depreciated that much our currency. Come on. So like, there's provincial insurance, which is kind of like we'll call it state insurance, and then third party. And I was lucky enough that I have third party insurance that covered the cost of it, but general insurance won't cover stuff like that. At the end of the day, it is not as good as a real leg. I don't care what any insurance company tells anybody about any of this. Is not a luxury item. The best of the best is still not as good as a real leg, and that's just the fact of the matter. Anyways, that's all I have to say about that, I think.
Well, thank you so much for especially for answering that question in there too. It made it a little bit more comfortable of a rotation there. So if you guys see any questions you want to answer in the chat, just feel free to jump in. But I do see I do see a question from Maddie. She says, I don't know much about Paralympic equipment, but are there certain regulations you have to go through to get chairs or prosthetics approved? So I guess for most of the viewers or the listeners, they don't know too much about the exact process of getting towards the Paralympics, but have there been any problems, whether it would be with your physical limitations or any other limitations out there? Were there any problems where it's difficult in the Paralympic requirement of equipment, if that makes any sense? The question is in the chat. So she's talking about financial equipment and how that translates to the Paralympics. I know D'Artagnan, you talked about the transition from being on the Paralympic team and then off their, the insurance that they gave. Is there any other stories or examples that we can kind of go off of for anyone?
I can speak to the Paralympic equipment. Yes, there's regulations. So I can only talk really about wheelchair basketball, maybe a little bit tennis and rugby. The chairs are generally limited how far back you can go. So you have these little wheels in the back of your chair casters, and they generally can't go past your rear wheel or your big wheels. So if you have the 26-inch wheels, whatever it is, those little casters can't pass that. And then there's regulations on height. So you can't go, it changes depending on your functional classification, but in every sport that uses a wheelchair as the equipment, there's regulations for the height, whether it's a max height or a min height. And there's regulations for how far your wheels can go back. And the reason there's only regulations on how far it goes back is because it's a huge advantage. If you think about, if you push those casters all the way past your big wheels, you're going to be significantly more stable at speed, right? So it would be an unfair advantage if someone put a huge caster in the back. Wheelchair tennis, that takes me to wheelchair tennis. They have very similar equipment policies and procedures, or limitations, I guess, but the back wheel one is not one of them. So if you watch tennis, they will have a small caster that goes in the back that extends significantly past their back because they're leaning back. So they need that weight to be able to shift all the way back. Do any of these regulations cause financial burden? I wouldn't say so. I would just say generally everything that you're going to do, anything that is medical, which is everything that we have is considered medical. It's like, buying an invitation for a birthday party versus a wedding. If it says wedding on it, it's 3 times more expensive. And that's just how it is with prosthetics and wheelchairs that, if you really think about the percentage of chairs that they're making versus how many people have a disability, they're charging, whatever, 12 grand for a chair, but they're only making 100 in a year or whatever it is.
What I was going to say, they don't make many parts, and all these are custom made. I just ran to try to find my arrow leg. So I had one custom made, and an aerofoil can't be more than 3:1. So it can't be 3 times longer than it is wide. So otherwise it is an aerofoil. And so I had to have that approved. But all of these things are specially made. Your wheelchair, I'm pointing at you, you can't tell, but it is specially made for you, or more or less adapted. And right, you're making 100 of them. So if you're thinking about how cost and that $900 floppy piece, how can you make prostheses and these adaptive equipments more accessible? And that comes down to finances. Insurance, going back to that. Insurance will allow someone one leg. So all of these running blades aren't considered functional. We don't need to cover that because you don't need to run. Okay, cool, thanks. That's sad, right? Yeah, you get to choose. Most prostheses have a selected walking speed. Prosthetic knees will have a preferred walking speed. Prosthetic feet have a spring rate, the carbon compresses and then expands. So how I think that comes back to how you can make these resources more accessible to people who have limited resources, whether it's war torn or recovering third world countries. We are incredibly lucky. When you go to the Paralympics, you will see people who will have maybe a proximal femoral focal deficiency, which means the femur probably didn't develop when they were a baby or an infant, and so they were born with a really short limb. In the United States, people have their feet amputated. While that sounds barbaric, it actually allows them to use a prosthesis better. When you go to the Paralympics, you will see people from other countries who never got to have surgery. And so they're having to, people are adapting, like they've had polio. We don't have that really in the States. It is a different world as soon as you leave here. So your skill set and your young, developing and wise minds, if you just like kind of peek over the wall just a little bit, you won't need just the three of us or other discussions like this to get ideas. So as soon as you look over, you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much we can do. And but the bottom line, anywhere you go, we'll come back to resources.
Yes, thank you so much. And I definitely 100% agree that depending on where you are, this discussion changes a lot, but the kind of the core part of the discussion is how can we make this accessible for everyone? Yeah. And that's kind of the problem that a lot of people are trying to deal with, and hopefully the people thinking about designs and hopefully winning the grand prize that everyone's looking forward to, hopefully we keep that in mind as well. I have a question in the chat for D'Artagnan, if I could just ask that real quickly. We've touched on improving mechanical and physical accessibility, but are there any specific vision-related challenges that you would like to see engineers work on? This could be anything. It's up to you.
I've seen a lot of things that work. So like personally with judo, like we don't use any kind of equipment. It's just a gi, and like we don't even like wear shoes. Like we'll use like tape to tape our fingers for like injuries and stuff like that. But like, yeah, we don't use any kind of equipment. Like able-bodied judo and Paralympic judo are like essentially exactly the same. We just start the match differently. So able-bodied judo starts, they'll start about 4 or 5 feet apart. Paralympic judo will start with the kumikata, which is just a traditional judo grip. One hand on the lapel of the gi, which it would be like the lapel of a suit jacket, and then one hand on the bottom of the sleeve. So we'll start with that grip. And if that grip breaks during competition, the referee will stop the match and they'll bring us back to the center of the mat, and then we'll assume that grip again. But as far as just specific things for vision, that's a good question. I guess I haven't really thought about it. So I've seen like a pair of glasses. I wasn't sure if it was a startup, but it was a pair of glasses that helped to zoom in. Essentially, it was like an electronic pair of glasses that helped like zoom in and focus on objects. The thing about it though, it was huge and cumbersome. Like it was. Do you guys remember those CC screen TVs like back in the day that like zoomed in on the paper it was like wearing a CC screen TV on my face when I tried it on. It was huge. And it, because my vision is just limited and actually this is kind of funny, but really messed up. I was wrongly diagnosed growing up. Like the school that I was in, no doctor diagnosis. A teacher wrote that I had Leber's congenital neurosis because I had shaky eyes and my vision was bad. I didn't find out until early 20s that you can't even diagnose anyone with Leber's unless you do genetic testing. And never had it my entire life. No doctor ever questioned it. No one ever did. And so all my life I had this label that I was going to have Leber's disease. And it wouldn't have been as bad if the label didn't come with, you're going to go blind. No questions asked, no doubt about it, by the time you're 25. And so I guess thinking of, yeah, that's a really good question. I want to think on that. Yeah, that's a good question on like visual things. I guess if not for, because I see so many other things that are like cameras that can identify objects that'll tell you like what the object is or what objects are in the picture, things like that. Like my mind's kind of going all over, like especially the more I think about it, because I'm thinking of stuff with hearing, stuff with the walking cane, stuff that could like assist with guide dogs, things like that. So Yeah, give me a couple days to sit with that question and think on it, and then I'll like write up some things and I can just send them to Leonie so you guys have that information.
That's perfectly okay. We're not asking for an answer per se to these questions. Shout out to Teddy for that very difficult question.
Right.
But that's perfect. I will also transition this event real quickly over to Leo, and we're going to be doing some rapid fire questions, kind of just pick your brain real quickly. If anyone has any last things they want to touch on, if not, then we can probably stay in pretty close contact the next few days in case we have some questions. And we'll definitely keep you guys updated with what direction we are going because of this awesome event that you guys have helped us out with today. But if there's anything else, I will send it over to Leo.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you, Sean, so much for moderating. You did an awesome job for doing the entire event. And wow, thank you so much to the panelists for that. Like, I thought I was gonna have like 4 posted for everyone. I ended up with like 15 posted on my desk talking about all the ideas that you guys gave us. I mean, this was amazing, beyond expectations. I hope everybody in the call enjoyed it, and we will make sure that we stay in close contact. So we'll put a survey to people that were there tonight. If they have any more questions or think about something after the call, we'll make sure that we bring that back to you all. And then if D'Artagnan, you think about something, we'll make sure that we keep connections, and so that people that were there on the call as well or inform and have more insights as well. And so I like to finish with rapid fire questions just to go into like lighthearted questions. And so we'll go into a couple ones real quick for about 2 minutes. And then every question, I'll go Nick, D'Artagnan, and Meg, one after the other. And so, yeah, let's have fun. Okay, that should be like a 1 word or 1 sentence answer. So we'll breathe and we're ready. Okay. Nick, what's your favorite book?
The Tattooist right now.
Okay, what'd you say? Okay.
Oh, sorry, The Tattooist, yeah.
Okay, cool. D'Artagnan.
Conversations with God.
Nice. Meg.
I love Endurance, about the 1918 Shackleton expedition. It is awesome.
Wow. Okay. What is one of your favorite movies? I know it's tough. There's a lot of them out there, but name me one that comes to mind.
Easy. Gladiator, #1 movie of all time.
Are you not entertained? Book of Eli.
Nice.
Nothing. Oh, I love the movie Up. Is that?
Oh yes, I love this movie. I cry all the time. Yes. Okay, Nick, what's something people often get wrong about you?
That I'm tall. I'm not.
Something that people often get wrong about me. That's a lot of things sometimes. Honestly, kind of that I'm tall too. People assume that I'm like 5'10" or 6 foot, but then when they see me, they're like, "Oh, you're taller on TV." It's like, well, duh. The camera's shot from an angle. I'm 5'7" on a tall day.
Cool.
I'm an open book. Brain trauma, frontal lobe injury. I just can't shut up. So
That's funny. Awesome. Okay, 2 more questions. What is a learning lesson that you continuously have to relearn?
I've learned, like, the more you know, the more you know you don't know.
Oh, I love that. Okay, that's a quote that we'll put out there.
Yeah, kind of the same thing. Like I would have said it. I like the words come to me differently, but yeah, like the greater your radius of knowing, and the more your radius of knowing increases, the greater your radius of unknowing also increases. Because yeah, the more you know, the more you don't know. Absolutely, I agree with that.
Awesome. What about you, Nick?
I go with like discipline over motivation and how important that is. Motivation, even like this project stuff. Yeah, I'm going with that. I won't talk anymore.
Awesome. Awesome, cool. Well, I want to be respectful of people's time, and so we'll stop it here. But I want to just give it to Joanna real quick for next steps for the challenge from that point. Now that we have so many ideas on post notes and all in our minds, let's put it into actions now.
Yeah, so I briefly just put the survey in if anyone hasn't already put their information in the survey, so we can send out the appropriate information. There's a submission box and there's an example in the, the abstract. I'm sure the engineers have seen this plenty, but the little formatting, if you so choose to submit an idea, it will be there and we'll give you some examples. But so the timeline that we're kind of looking at is if you're going to submit something, we would like you to submit it by 5 p.m. Eastern on the 18th. And then we'll hopefully have all the rankings announced and we'll have the winner. And you can get these lovely basketballs Leo has mentioned on the 22nd. That is our plan as of now. If you have any other questions, again, if you're in the RIISE organization, don't hesitate to ask me. I'll answer all your questions, but I'll put the timeline in there real quick.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you to everyone that came tonight. So grateful for all of the panelists that are here. Honestly, you guys made my night. And yeah, I'll leave it to Sean for the close it all together as our moderator and superstar of the podcast.
Throw me on the spot like that? I didn't have anything prepared. Yes, thank you everyone for coming out. I appreciate it so much. We can be reached on Instagram and Twitter at RIISE Purdue, and RIISE has 2 I's. So if anyone outside of our organization has any questions, including you guys, we'll be in contact, keeping you guys updated with what's going on. But I appreciate you guys so much for talking and going above and beyond and answering our questions and providing us with information where we can ask questions, and hopefully we'll find some answers. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that came out, and we'll exchange contact with anyone that needs it. So everyone have a good one. Goodbye.